Today's daf we're going to be learning is Menachot daf samach tet. It's the daf for Shabbat. We're going to get started from the top of our daf in the second line by Rami Bar Chama. We saw a question that Rami Bar Chama asked yesterday, and today we're going to see more questions that Rami Bar Chama asked, and from there we're going to get off on all sorts of other questions as well. So the first question by Rami Bar Chama: Shtei halechem hanatzah sharia or chanatah sharia? So Rami Bar Chama asked the following question, which we're not going to exactly understand at first, and then the Gemara is going to try to figure out what exactly the question is, but I'll explain as much as we can try to figure out at this point. The Shtei halechem offering, the 2 loaves, they basically permit, or they're one of the things that happens, you can't bring the bikurim, the first fruits, until after the Shtei halechem. So therefore, the Shtei halechem seems to be also a cutoff point for the bikurim. Now, we normally think of the bikurim as something brought on Shavuot, but actually you can bring them after Shavuot as well. What if your fruits aren't ready? So now we're going to talk about fruits that are on the tree, but they're not yet fully ready. So the question is, seems like the Shtei halechem is the marker time for were these ready or not for this year that you could actually bring them as bikurim, or is it too early in the stage for it to be called bikurim of this year? They'll be with next year's crop, okay? And you'll bring them next year bikurim. So what the question is here, let's read again, Shtei halechem, so that Shtei halechem, the moment you bring the Shtei halechem, hanatzah sharia or chanatah sharia? Does it have to be at the stage of hanatzah or chanatah? Exactly not 100% clear what these stages are, but it seems to be either hanatzah is the earlier stage, where first usually what happens with fruit tree, right? First the flower, it flowers, then there's a little bit of fruit, and then the flower falls off and you have the fruit underneath. Still not ready yet, but that's the stage. The stage of chanatah is when the flower falls off. The stage of chanatah, okay, again, there's different explanations about this. Rashi elsewhere explains these definitions. I'm going with that. Hanatzah could be either when the flower comes out, or maybe when the fruit comes out underneath the flower, okay, while the flower is still there. So the question is, does it have to reach that stage or that stage in order to say, oh, you can bring these as bikurim of this year if, right, you reach that stage before the Shtei halechem are brought. So now the Gemara says, that's what we seem to be saying right now. The Gemara says, my hanatzah, my chanatah, what are we talking about? Hanatzah and chanatah. Ilaim hanatzah de peri v'chanatah de peri, what we thought. The budding of the fruit, or the budding of the flower or the fruit, right, or the flower falling off. Hashda hashrasha sharia. In general, when it comes to the crops, which we're going to see in a minute, they're going to quote a Mishnah in another 2 minutes, about from the next daf, that taking root when it comes to things that grow in the ground is what determines is a chadash. Okay, like if when you do the omer, it's already taken root, that's considered this year's crop. Well, hanatzah v'chanatah mebaya, for sure those are much later stages. Obviously in a tree you don't have the roots because the roots are there from way before. But it's definitely a much later stage than just the grains taking root in the ground. Ela, so it must be hanatzah de'aleh v'chanatah de'aleh. We must be talking about the budding of the leaf. Okay, again, these 2 stages, what exactly would be in a leaf is a good question, but some stage of the leaf being there, being created, right, starting to come out or finish coming out before it even gets to the budding stage. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. We must be talking about an earlier stage. And then the question is the beginning, right, which stage of the leaf's development from which the fruit's going to grow on, mihavik hashrasha olo. Is that like hashrasha or not? Right, is it hanatzah or chanatah for the leaf? And the answer is teku, which is the way we're going to answer all of our questions today. By Rava bar Rav Chana. Now, before we get back to other questions of Rami Bar Chama, we had 2 so far, one in yesterday's daf, one in today's. Now we're getting off based on this whole issue of hashrasha. We're going to get off on a question that Rava bar Rav Natan has. Chitim shezara'an bekarka. If I planted grains of wheat in the ground, omer mitiran or ain't omer mitiran? Does the omer permit them or not? Remember, the korban omer permits the new grain to be eaten. So if I planted in the ground before the korban omer, does the omer permit? To which the Gemara says, Hechidami. Again, what's the case? Okay, in most of these questions, we're going to have to figure out what exactly they're asking. Ida ishrush tanina. Ida lo ishrush tanina. Either which way, whether it took root or didn't take root, we have a Mishnah, which is going to be on Daf Ayin, that we're going to see on tomorrow's Daf, which says exactly what the story is. Titnan, as it says in the Mishnah, Im ishrishu kodem la omer, omer mitiran. If they took root before the korban omer was brought, then the Omer permits them. That's already considered new grains. Ve'im lav, asurin ad shiavo Omer haba. And if they didn't take root yet, then you have to wait till the next Omer. So it can't possibly be that Rava bar Rav Chanan was asking about that. Lo tzricha, it must be dechazdinu v'zachinu kodem laOmer. Must be. You cut it. It was already ready, the grains. You cut them before the Omer. But then you took the grains, instead of using them for eating, you replanted them. And then, Ata Omer v'chalif alayu. And then the Omer came, after you planted it. V'kame ba'ile mahu l'nekute u'mechal minayu. Do we say, now, what happened? Now, the Omer came, okay, one second, the chalif alayhu, right, chatzinu kodem la'omer, right, you'd have to say, okay, they don't say this, but they didn't take root before the Omer, okay, so you planted them, but then the Omer came before anything happened. Now, the question is, can you eat from these this year? Because, on the one hand, it didn't take root. On the other hand, right, so when it grows later in the year, can you say, oh, this was really from the new crop of this past year? Because it was really, what was planted was from the new crop that was already reaped, already harvested. And then we just replanted it. So that's really, right? That goes from the Chadash of this year. Or do we say, look, you replanted it, now it's a new thing, and until, right, it grows, it's not going to be permitted until the following year. Now, the way they put the question, though, is like this. By putting this in the ground, is it kind of similar to putting something in a jug? If I put a bunch of grains in a jug, right, and the shadia b'kada demai, it's like I put them in a jug with water, right, and the Omer would then permit it, okay, because just because I put it in the ground, it's still the stuff that grew from last year. Odilma, or right, that was already reaped before Shavuot, before the Omer. Odilma batilahu legabe ara, or do we say, no, this is like canceled to the ground. In other words, it's like putting it back in the ground, and it's basically considered like it's in the ground. And then we have to wait till, right, did it take root? Did it not take root? And then you wouldn't be able to eat it till the following year. Now, because he asked this question about it, he says there's also follow-up questions that come up that are relevant to other topics we've actually learned in the past in Seder Nezikin. So, in the fourth chapter of Bava Metzia, we had a whole discussion about ona'ah, about if I overcharge. So the question is, now there's no overcharging when it comes to land. So now the question is going to be, is this movable property where there would be laws of overcharging, or is it not movable property? In which case, right, because if it's batel to the land, then it's basically treated like land, like anything planted in the ground, which has laws like land, which wouldn't have laws of ona'at. That's the first follow-up question. So they say, yesh lahem ona'ah or ein lahem ona'ah. Either laws of ona'ah or they're not laws of ona'ah. So now they say again, let's figure out what exactly this question is though. Hechidami, what's the case? If I say, look, I'm selling you the crops in this land. I planted 6 kor. Okay, that's a measurement. I planted 6 kor. Now, ona'ah is usually I'm overcharging you by a 6th. So they come up with a case where I'm overcharging you by a 6th. Va'atu sade, witnesses came, va'amre, to lo shade ba ela chamisha. They said I only planted 5 kor, not 6. But Hamar Rava says no. Kol davar sheb'midah v'sheb'mishkal v'sheb'minyan afilu pachot mechdei ona'ah chozel. Even if I cheat you less than a 6, if I overcharge you less than a 6, if it's something that's measurable and I say I'm selling you this and I actually lied about what I was selling you, that's not ona'ah. That just means I lied, and that's what we call a mekach ta'ud, a mistaken sale, and everything is returned. So that's not ona'ah. There wouldn't be a question here. Ela da'amar le shadar b'ki debayla. What I said is, I'm selling you the crops in this land, in this area, the grains that I replanted, and I planted in the amount that is relevant for this land. That's the amount that could be planted in this size property. Va'atu came witnesses va'amre de lo shadar b'ki debayla. Witnesses came and said, no, I didn't. They said, we saw Michelle plant. She definitely did not put the amount that she could have put in. And then we'd have to say it was off by a 6th, what they say into what I say. Yesh lahem ona'ah. Okay, do we say there's ona'ah here? Because this is not davar sheb'midah mishkalu b'minyan, because we never specified exactly what. It was a very subjective term. So do we say there's laws of ona'ah? It's like I put in a jug with water. And there's laws of ona'ah. Do we say no? This is like land. And land, since it went back in the land, it becomes, kind of part of the land. And again, because this is different than a regular seed, because regular seeds for sure are considered part of the land, but this had already grown before I put it in the land. So the question is it considered land or not, is a question. And one third question about this case, nishbe'in alehem or ein nishbe'in alehem. Likewise, if we say whether this is land or movable, there's other relevant issues. Like, for example, if I admit that I owe you half, let's say we had an argument over this property and you claim all of it was yours, and I claim, no, half of it was yours, but half of it is mine. That's what we call modeh b'miksat. Okay, so like I'm claiming the whole land, you come and say, what are you doing in my land? And I say, well, half of it is yours. Okay, the crop, let's say. We're talking about the grains. So in the world of Shvuot, okay, which could also be, let's say, Eid Echad. Okay, we have a disagreement. I say it's all mine, you say it's all yours, but I've got the property right now, and then you bring a witness that says it's really yours. You can make me take an oath. But I only take an oath on movables, not on land. So, same question. Is it like I threw it in a jug with water, and it's like movables, and then I would have to take an oath. Or do we say this is just considered part of the land, and therefore I wouldn't take an oath? We end with a question. Okay, that was all Rava bar Rav Chanan about the chitim that were planted in the land, which was a break off on the issue of, right, once we got it talking about the Hishrishu that we mentioned in the question of Rami bar Chama, we got off on a tangent about that. By Rami bar Chama. Now comes back to Rami bar Chama. Okay, the cases are going to get a little disgusting, the next two cases. Chitim shebiglalei bakar usorim shebiglalei behema mahu. What if we have grains of wheat or barley in the feces of an animal? Lemai. So first the Gemara says ma. What's the question? Rami bar Chama asks, what's the status? So the Gemara says lemai. For what's the topic? And if we want to know, let's say a person who's impure touches the food, these grains that are in the feces of the animal, are they impure? So, Tanina, that can't be the question, because we already have a Mishnah, it's actually a Tosefta, that says, they talk specifically about this, and they make the following distinction. If you have grains that are in the feces of the animal, if you thought, I'm going to take them out and I'm going to eat them, that's where it gets pretty disgusting. By my thoughts alone, now we're going to see later where my thoughts do come into play when it comes to laws of impurity. But in this case, my thoughts alone, since it's so disgusting, it's irrelevant. Okay, unless I actually take them out. Okay, and that's what we're going to see right now. If I took them out and I plan to eat them now, but they're actually removed from the feces, then already metame tumat ochel, and then it will be. So that can't be the question because the law is pretty clear. Ella lemenachot. So maybe Rami bar Chama is asking about the mincha. Can I use it for a mincha offering? Okay, well, Gemara is going to say pshita delo. That for sure you can't. For sure that's not the question. Because, quoting this pasuk in Malachi that we've seen a bunch of times, you're going to bring this disgusting thing to the temple. What, is God going to want it? God's not going to want your korban if it came from the feces of an animal. No way, no how. Lo tzricha, it must be a case. Dinaktinu v'zalinu, where you took it and you planted it. So you took the feces, you took the grains out of the animal's feces, you planted it in the ground, and then it grew. Now, do you say the following? Ma, mishum de mi'isutahu. The whole problem with bringing this for a mincha was because it was disgusting. But kevandas are inu, now that you planted it, now something new grows from there. That's not disgusting anymore. O dilma mishum chishutahu. Or maybe we say that while it went through the digestive system of the animal, it got weaker. And then, and then if you planted something that was weaker, it's already not going to bring a good crop. If it's not a good crop, we don't want to be using that for the mincha because we want the best of the best for the mincha offering. So that's the question. Can you use it for a mincha if it was replanted? And obviously we end in teiku. We don't have an answer. Moving now to the fourth question of Rami Bar Chama. By Rami Bar Chama. Pil shabalak fifa mitzrit. Okay, now we start getting into disgusting and also quite out there. So an elephant swallows a basket, a wicker basket. V'hiki'ah derech beit hara'i. And then it comes out in the feces of the elephant. Mahu. What's the status? Okay, again, what are we talking about? Lemai. Ilema limbevatel tumata. Well, maybe we'll say it was a vessel and it was impure before it was swallowed. Then the elephant swallows it, and when it comes out of the animal, even though it came out whole, maybe it's no longer impure, because maybe we don't call that a vessel anymore. It's kind of disgusting. So, here's the question. So if you want to say it's the Mevatel Tumata, Tanina, we already have a Mishnah about, or a Tanaitic source about this, it's kind of surprisingly, but not exactly this case. But it says the following. This is what I said before about where your thoughts come into play, where it comes up with Tuma. If I want to, let's say I'm building a vessel, okay? And it's not really ready yet, but I already say it's ready enough for me to use for something. And I think this in my head or say I'm going to use this for something, even though I haven't used it. If I have some use for it, like often they give this case of the leather hide of an animal, it's not really useful, but it actually can be used as a cover on a couch. So you can throw it over your couch and sit on it. If I say, even though this isn't finished, I plan to use it as is, as a cover to my couch, then it already becomes a vessel that could become impure. So that's what it means. Yordim lidei tumatam b'machshava could become tameh just by my thoughts alone. But ein olim mitumatam ela b'shinoi maaseh. But if we want something to remove its tameh status, like something was a vessel, and then we want to say, oh, it's no longer a vessel, and it was impure, and now we want to say, oh, we don't care that it was impure. Right now it's not impure anymore because it's not even a vessel. The impurity is removed. You can't do that by thoughts alone. So you would have to actually have an action. Now, in our case, what happened? No real action happened to this. This got swallowed by the elephant, but it came right out. So nothing happened to it. It didn't change form at all. So of course it's going to still be impure. So what's the question? So now that it's going to be a little more outlandish, the case. Lo tzricha, until now it was just kind of disgusting. Now we're going to get really out there. Lo tzricha de balahutzin. It swallowed the branches of a lulav, the palm branches. It swallowed palm branches. V'avdinu kfifa mitzrit, and in the body of the elephant, it went through some digestive process and came out as a basket. Mi have ikul. Do we say this is just digestion? V'havele, and now if it's created by digestion of the animal, then it's basically created by feces of the animal. And then, turning out to amabet, havele kikli glalim. It's like a vessel made from excrement of an animal. Kiklei adama, and then that's just like klei adama, which is also created from soil, which also we say, ein mekablim tuma. These they're not susceptible to impurity. So the question is, do we remove impurity from something that was already pure? This wasn't even a vessel until now. Do we call this a vessel to say, oh, you know what, this could be susceptible to impurity? Da'amar, as it said in a Mishnah in Kalim, klei avanim uklei glalim uklei adama. Okay, so stone vessels, one's made of excrement and adama, and one's made from the soil. Ein mekablim tuma lo midivrei Torah v'lo midivrei sofrim. So they certainly don't have any tumah, not by Torah law, not by rabbinic law. So that would be one way of saying it. This vessel is basically made from excrement. O dilma lo havi ikul. Or maybe you say, no, it's not really from the digestive system of the animal and it's from their excrement or feces. No, it just went through the body, came out as a basket, and, that's not klei glalim, and it would be susceptible to impurity. So now they try to suggest an answer. From a crazy case, again, tifshalei mehal, let's learn it from here. I mean, this isn't as unrealistic, but it's a little unpleasant, or very unpleasant. Okay, de'amar ula mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehud Sadak. Ula said the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehud Sadak. Maseu bal'u, it should be shnei ze'evim, tinokot, or maybe shnei ze'evim, shnei tinokot, be'ever ha'yarden. There was a case in the Transjordan where 2 wolves swallowed 2 children. And then what happened? They then excreted the children. Okay, they came out of their bodies, but they were dead, and they were in parts. So, tiot habasar, they said, even though this is flesh of dead children, it's not impurity of a dead person. Why? Because it went through, we're assuming it went through this digestive process and it no longer has impurity. Ubama shane basar dirakich, they say, no, that's different because the flesh was very soft. So of course it changed form completely in the body of the animal because it was so soft. To which they say, okay, well, you can't learn it from there because that's much softer than what we're discussing. Let's learn it from the end of that source. Vitim'u et ha'atzamot. Well, they actually said that the bones of the children are tameh. They carry impurity of a dead body, of dead, bones from a dead person. To which they say, and then we could say, so what do you see here? If it's not so soft, but harder like bones, then we'll say it's makabel tumah. So maybe this basket will be susceptible to impurity. To which they answer, shane atzamot da'akushe tfei. No, atzamot are different. Sorry, I wanted to just clarify. I think I just said something not correct. Let me just think about it. If you say timuot atzamot, then they say the atzamot are basically intact as they were before. They're not affected by the process. If you say they're not affected by the process here, then you would say it would be the same. I did say it, right? You will be basically saying they're impure. They can be susceptible to impurity because it was a vessel that was created not because of the process that it went through in the animal's body of, the excrement and all that. So they say, no, shane atzamot da'akushe tfei. No, bones are significantly hard. Now, we have the flesh was way too soft. The bones are way too hard. Our case is in the middle. So we don't really know where it goes, and we're left with a question. That's the end of the 4 questions of Rami Bar Chama. In the middle, we have Rabbi Bar of Hanan. Now we're going to go off on 2 other people's questions, Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. By Rabbi Zera, Chitim she'ardu ba'avim. Okay, now we're not in the discussing cases anymore, but the very unrealistic cases. If you have grains that fell down from the clouds, okay, some people describe, they say Rashi is talking about some sort of tornado that kind of blew them up into the sky and then they fall out of the sky. So what's the status? Okay, lemai, again, the Gemara wants to know, what are you talking about? Status for what? Ila menachot, amai lo. If we're talking about menachot, why not? You can take grains from anywhere. Who cares whether it came from the skies or not? Ela lishtei lechem. We're talking about the shtei lechem. Why is shtei lechem any different? Mai, do we say mi moshvotechem amar Rachmana? Has to come from your dwelling places. Now, what does that mean? Lafuke chutz la'aretz delo. Well, that's coming to exclude. It has to be from your dwelling places in Israel. Can't come from outside the borders of Israel. Aval avim, davim, but from the clouds up in the heavens, shapridami, that's fine. That's not chutz la'aretz. If you understand what shvotechem is basically being a term to exclude anywhere outside the borders of Israel, well, the heavens are not really outside the borders of Israel. They're not considered chutz la'aretz. O Dilma, or do we say, mi moshvotechem dafka? Or maybe we say, no, it's from your dwelling places specifically, in a positive sense. Not what it's excluding, but what does it mean? It means from Israel. Now, afilu davim damilo, but the clouds are not the land of Israel, so maybe it's not good. Umi, okay, so now the Gemara doesn't even try to answer the question, doesn't even say teku. We know we have no answer. But the Gemara does ask what you'd be expecting it to ask. Can the following thing really happen? Yes, in fact, it could happen. And they're going to tell a story that was told. Kede Adi Taya, or maybe Bar Adi Taya. Okay, there was a merchant. Nechita le rum kiz bachite betlata parse. Fell down for him from the heavens an amah thick worth of grains, covering, and it's that high, covering a span of 3 parsaot. Okay, meaning there's some story people were telling. I don't know what really happened there, but where all of a sudden these grains fell down from the heavens or fell down from the clouds, and he had all these grains from that. Okay, hard to believe story, but so they do quote it. Okay, by Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Shibolet shevia shlish kodem laomer va'akara ushtala la'achara omer v'hosifa. Okay, we're out of the unrealistic and the disgusting cases. We're back to just a regular case. We have a stalk that grew a third of its way before the omer, which means it's from the new stuff. But then you uprooted it, and then you replanted it after you brought the omer. And hosifa, and now it grew more from the replanting. Mau, batar ikar azlinam v'sharya omer. Do we say we go by the main part of it, which was the stalk and the part that had already grown? Or do we say batar tosefet azlinan? Or do we go by the growth? And then ad shiavo omer haba, right? If we go by the main part, well, that was already permitted by the korban omer. If we go by the new growth, what it grew from its replanting, then we'd have to say wait till next year. So which one do we do? Tiv shaleh. So now they're going to try to answer it, but we'll see in the end they're not going to succeed. Why don't you answer the question from Mehad Amar Rabbi Avahu Amar Rabbi Yochanan Yalda shesibcha b'zkena uba perot. If you took a young tree which had fruit that was orla, that's forbidden for the first 3 years, and you grafted it with an older tree, and then it grew a lot more fruits. V'afilu hosif, and there were already fruits on this kena. Afilu hosif b'matayim asur. Even if you added 200, meaning even if now the tree grew so much more from the old one, and there's 200 new fruits, it's still going to be all forbidden. That seems to say we follow the old, right? The central part of it, which would mean that now in this case, we're going to forbid it. In our case, it would actually permit it. If we go by the original, then we're actually in good shape because then it's chadash for this year. The Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonatan, he's going to bring another case where we seem to see the same principle. Batzal sheshtalo b'keren. If you planted onion in a vineyard, which is not allowed, kilei keren, right? There and it's forbidden to benefit. V'ne'ekara keren, but then you uprooted the keren, and now the batzal, the onion, continued to grow. Afilu osif b'matayim, even if it added 200 times what was there before, asur. It's still going to be forbidden. So these both seem to say you follow the root of it, right? The main central part that it started from. But this, and then you would say, so in both those cases that we just brought are forbidden. Kilei hakerem, right? It was kilayim at first, it was orla at first. It doesn't matter what we add, it's still going to be forbidden. But in our case, they're now going to say, he gufa kamebayale. So Rabbi Shimon says, that's exactly what my question is. What does that mean? Mifsha pshita lehu leRabbanan debatar aslinan, debatar ikar aslinan, loshna lekula loshna lechumra. Do we say that it's obvious to the rabbis here that we follow the main central part, right? The original part. Doesn't matter lekula, doesn't matter lechumra, doesn't matter whether we're being lenient or strict. That's one way to read it. And then they have a very clear answer. You always follow what it was originally. In our case, we'd be lenient. The other two cases, we said we were strict. But, right, because again, if we follow the lenient position, by us, the relevant is that we're going to say it's already chadash. In the other cases, the original was the forbidden one, the orla and the kilei hakerem. So it would actually be worse if we follow the original. O dilma sipuke mesapgalahu, or maybe when the rabbis rule in both those cases it's forbidden, they're just because they're not really sure what the halacha is. Ulechumra amrinan lekula lo amrinan. And since you're not sure what the halacha is, what do you say? Well, it's Torah law, so let's go and be stringent. In our case, we would say the opposite. We would be lenient because in our case, well, to be lenient would be to, right, not that we'd be lenient. In our case, we'd be strict as well, but then we would reverse it. It wouldn't be batari karas linan, it would be we go by the new growth because that's the stringent. That means don't eat this grain until the following year when you bring the korban ha'omer. So do we say that we just go the chumrah because we don't really know what the answer is? And the answer is teku. We're left with the question. So to summarize this stuff, I'm not going to go through every single question we asked, but I am going to just mention that overall in this daf, we had a slew of questions. 3, and the one from yesterday was Rami Bar Chama's questions. Within that, we got off on a tangent about Rava Bar Rav Chanan because we were talking about the rooting, taking root and all that, and he got on a question of the Omer, even though Rami Bar Chama's question was Shtei Alechem, and with the fruits and the Bikurim, but then he compared it to the Omer and the new grains. And then we had the other questions about the excrement of the animals and stuff mixed in there, and what the status is if you could create a basket, and what we say in terms of tuma and different issues there. And then we had some other questions about some unrealistic things like rains falling from the heavens, and then a grain that's replanted. What does it go by? And then we brought these other cases. In some cases, we tried to answer the questions, but every time we had tried to answer, we said maybe it would be different. Maybe we didn't. Maybe that was just out of doubt. Okay, and that's where we end today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and Shavuot Tov.